Welcome to the Ameen Coffee Chat, a new series we're starting where we take you behind the scenes of Everwood Reserve, the 32-bed memory care community that we are building in Tomball, Texas. I am Aaron Ameen, and this is my lovely wife, Andrea.
We wanted to invite you into our home, get to know us better, get to know more about our project. So we hope you enjoy listening in.
All right, let's get to it.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Ameen Coffee Chat, a coffee chat that is not mean, rather a chat with the Ameens over coffee. And yes, I did have to add a dad joke there. That's gonna be my shtick, I think, for these. But yeah, we wanted to do this as a more intimate conversation, a little bit more casual. We've done a podcast episode before, but we kind of wanted to do something in a different style. So I'll kind of lead a conversation, but what we really wanted to do today was talk about a bit about our founding story and what motivates us to do this project, and then talk about some next steps because we have some exciting things coming up. So to start, well, I wanted to compare and see if we have the same answer to this question, which is what was the starting point to us deciding to build Everwood Reserve?
This is like that FBI interrogation where they take the witnesses and one in each room and see if their stories match up, right? But
what was the starting point?
Thank you for setting this up. This is fun. We have all these conversations in the course of our day-to-day life. And, it's funny. We were joking that before we set up our weekly meetings, the average time we would catch up is like on the van on the way to drop off the kids at daycare, or trying to, fit it in between kids pulling and tugging at us. And so getting a glimpse inside our house and a little bit more of our day-to-day life.
Yep.
Yeah. So where did the journey start? It's a bit of a long story in the sense that, we came from our real estate background where you and I fell in love with the idea of buying real estate, rental properties, building something of our own, and trying to make sure, we weren't too dependent on one source of income, basically. It was born out of this idea that we were both working really, really, really hard in our careers. And we felt like our financial upside was capped and that we weren't necessarily getting the reciprocal value or appreciation that we wanted from our employers. So we wanted to take matters into our own hand. So we started buying rental properties, but as luck would have it, the rental number 2 and 3 were these assisted living properties. We were right place, right time. The agent that helped us buy our first rental property, he called us 4 months later and he said, hey, these 2 deals came across my desk. They're both leased to a company that provides assisted living for adults with developmental disabilities. And I was like, wow, I don't know anything about any of this because we just bought one rental property 4 months ago. We're still learning the basic ropes. But from everything he explained to us, it sounded like a really cool deal. And it was also the first time we ever heard about residential assisted living, at least for me.
Yeah.
I had only heard of the big box facilities. We had some experiences with your family that we'll talk about later. And the idea of this service-based business where people can live much closer to a normal life that they've grown to expect, obviously resonated with us out of the gate. Not to mention, those were incredible financial opportunities too. Much easier to deal with than a standard long-term tenant. And the rent was guaranteed by the company. There were subsidies from the state. And it just felt like, all in all, a much better arrangement. So how did we actually get to Everwood Reserve? I'll fast forward a bit, right? We kept buying single-family rental properties. This is our dog, Arnold, by the way. He seems very captivated by it.
I know. I was going to intro him after this. Yep, we have Arnold here. He is he's the first and only dog we've ever gotten as a couple. And he came to us in Vegas during that stint, which was the same chapter that we acquired those 2 residential assisted living homes.
Exactly.
He was with us from the very beginning.
Yes, he's seen it all.
Anyways.
Predates our children. But anyway, he's listening. I appreciate the captivity, Arnold.
He's taking it all in, clearly.
But we kept buying rental properties. As our life evolved, we had kids, we changed careers. A lot of different stuff happened in our life. But ultimately, with the benefit of 5 years of hindsight, in 2024, we looked back and we said, out of all the properties we own and out of everything we've done, which ones perform the best financially, and also which ones are the most in line with what we want moving forward. And those 2 properties far outperformed our standard rentals And just so happened at that same time, I heard a podcast episode from our friend, Dr. Alex Schlow, where he explained that he had a whole group and had built a whole business and portfolio of doing exactly what we had done with those other 2 houses, buying properties and leasing them to operators. And so when I heard that, there was a very quick spiral down the rabbit hole into learning more about residential assisted living. We joined their mastermind group, started doing the research, and to make sure this story doesn't drag on forever, the more we learn about the opportunity and the asset class, the more we kind of developed our vision over time. And we went from thinking, we'll just buy a house and turn it into something that we could lease to a company. We started exploring our personal passion and our vision for maybe we could do this ourselves. And I think I want to flip the script to your answer now, because you, I think, coming in and having this really igniting with the passion behind this idea is what took it from just another rental property real estate deal to what it is now, which is, this entire business that we're starting with a grand vision. So.
Yeah, well, you had the same answer that I had, which was the acquiring the 2 residential assisted living homes in Vegas. I think that is the actual catalyst. But then my next question was going to be, I picked 3. What are 3 other top factors that led us into the project? And I think you've talked about our rentals and just being investors and landlords kind of as a factor as well.
Yeah, I think what is not as often talked about when people make decisions about what they want to do with rentals and investing, you work hard to earn the money that you have, and then you have choices about how and where you can invest it. The same can be said for time, right? And we, as life went on, COVID hit, my 10-year career in the entertainment industry evaporated overnight, and it forced us to make decisions about where we live that are, we were responding to factors that are beyond just does it make sense to buy a rental property? We moved our entire life 1,200 miles from Vegas to Washington, and, completely different cost of living up there, completely different economics. Then we had a kid, turning the tables upside down, right? And so everything changed very rapidly in our life. And then 2 years later, we found out we were having twins, and we moved again across the country, this time 2,500 miles. And so I share all that personal context because I feel like it's hard to rationalize why you make the leap from something like single family rentals that you're buying on the side to doing a fully active business like this without that context. Our life changed dramatically. We gained the perspective of being parents. We know that we have a limited window of time with our kids, and we don't want that to slip by. And so we wanted to do something that not only aligned with our vision for the impact we want to have, but it could have an accelerated path to get to our financial goals, so that you didn't have to go back to a W-2 job and work 9 to 5 in an office while we're both doing that and burning out, right? So there is these lifestyle considerations, the changes in our finances, and then the perspective that we gained from having kids. I think that they really rallied behind this. Yeah,
this is awesome. You're saying the exact things that I had planned to say myself. So our answers definitely match. The one other factor, so I had COVID, which led us to move the first time, and then the move to Texas, which was catalyzed by the twins, and then also kind of both of us switching careers, which really stemmed out of COVID, I guess ultimately, but I think those are really the biggest that you could really point to and say, yes, those are the reasons that led us to this decision to decide to take on and building a community now. So, okay, cool. We're very much aligned with how we think about the journey.
What are the chances?
Go figure, we've been doing it together. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool to hear. So another thing that I wanted to talk about are things that you want future investors to know about us. So part of the reason why we're doing this coffee chat is because we are going to launch our 506c offering. And by the time this comes out, it will already have launched. And so this is also a way to communicate with future investors and help them get to know us, not only as professionals, but as real people. And so I didn't know if there's anything that you wanted to share in this discussion that would help to illuminate investors as to why they should trust us, why we are the right people to build this community in Tomball.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no single answer to this, but a few things I think that are important for people to remember is, this is not our first deal. This is not our first exposure to real estate. It's not our first exposure to running businesses. We are bringing a really broad base of perspective and talent to the team. Mm-hmm. It's not even just you and I. We've brought in a lot of really talented people like Joseph Raspberry. Mm-hmm. He's going to be our director of strategic growth and partnerships. And he brings medical perspective and healthcare experience to help make sure that we're not only providing the highest quality of care, but helping understand how to liaise with people in that industry,
yes.
hire, retain staff. That's one of the biggest problems in this industry is retention and finding the right people for your team that are going to represent the quality of care that we want to have. The quality of care is what drives everything else. It drives the revenue.
Yes, thank you.
It drives the reputation. And ultimately, of course, it drives the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So, we believe that with the vision that you have and the experience, which again, we need to talk about, right? Is like you saw a lot of stuff you didn't like in the experience you had with your family. And so we have a very clear idea of what we don't want. And we also have a lot of markers for what we do want, as far as how people think of us. And it's already one of the most emotional, difficult decisions that people have to make with their loved ones in their life is, at the time when it may become necessary to put them in a home like this. So we want to make that a lot easier.
Yes.
As far as investors go, though, so this is a really complicated business, and it's not something that I think the barriers to entry are high enough that even though a lot of investors are hearing about residential assisted living, I should go open one, the actual time and effort that it takes to put into launching something like this is not accessible for most people. You have to make a lot of sacrifices and put yourself in a position to do this. So what I would like to think is that we're also giving people access, front row seat, to view the actual launching, startup, the construction, the development, the decision making. Hopefully you can see we're putting out content. This is public content that we're going to share on our channels, but with our investors, we're going to have much more detailed reports and behind the scenes look into not only like why we built the plan the way we did, but how are we actually executing? What do we do when something inevitably doesn't go as we thought it would? Mm-hmm. How are we reacting to that? How is it influencing the returns, et cetera? So there's an educational benefit that I think, when we made our first investment as LPs, that was one of the things I was looking for, was to build relationships with operators, get that peek behind the curtain. And, if it was something I was considering doing, I could get a pretty good idea if I actually would want to do it or not, just based on what I learned from watching other people go through the stress. So that's one. I mean, the team, it's a team sport for sure. This is a marathon. This isn't something where we go buy a storage facility, put some month or two and $50,000 into renovation and then set it and forget it. This is a 24/7 business with people's care. People are trusting us, for round the clock care. So I think there's a lot of operational complexity, but we have the right people and the right systems we're modeling after that we've seen work elsewhere. We're not going to reinvent the wheel on anything that we don't feel is broken. And we're also going to add personalization and passion, behind the vision for the company.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for those points. Those are all things we really want investors to know. And it brought into the conversation something that we've been wanting to talk more about. And I guess I never know what is the right time or what is the right audience. I am not very good at sharing like the actual founding story and like the background with my own family and with my dad and those experiences. But you hit on it in this response, and I think this is a good time to talk about that. And we were talking about it earlier today because I realized that I talk about my dad who had early onset dementia, and that came about in his 50s. I was 20, I think. And I talk about my grandparents who had Alzheimer's, but I also realized I don't think I've mentioned to folks that I lived with my grandparents growing up. I lived in the house with my grandparents, and I was really, really close to them. And I was reading today a book that was suggested by an industry expert, Being Mortal. And it brought up, the author talks about the fact that he didn't really think about aging, dying, or he didn't really have a lot of experience with elderly people until he was like in college. And I thought, wow, that's like really different than my experience. And I think something that I take for granted or I don't even think to talk about. But I do want folks to know that about my background, because I think it really does give me a unique experience that will help me to be stellar in this industry and a stellar carer and a manager and administrator of these homes, the CEO of our company. I think that my experiences living with my grandparents, having such close relationships with them, watching them go from people who were independent and driving and picking me up from school to then not really being able to come down the stairs for breakfast, staying in their room mainly, forgetting things, those first signs of Alzheimer's, and just living through that with them, in the house with them, until, they needed to then go to an assisted living home and a nursing home. But so I guess I just wanted to bring that up and talk about that here in this space.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for perspective too. And what we've found, which is both interesting and hard to process sometimes, is when we bring this business up to people, 95% of the time, they either have dealt with it with their parent or their grandparent, or they know an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or someone who's dealing with something like this. Mm-hmm. And so the core of this business hits really close to home, literally and figuratively, for just about everybody. And so the experience that you have, especially when you were young with your dad and like dealing with the facilities there's a whole also confusing process of dealing with these organizations. Their healthcare bureaucracy and like paperwork and protocols is confusing for the families, right? And so a benefit of something like Everwood Reserve, it's a family-run business run by people who know the things that they did not enjoy about having their own family members, right? Like even my grandma was in a facility too. And then my dad's mom lived in Bangladesh and she also dealt with dementia. They dealt with it very differently there, but it is a very challenging thing, right? And even family members with the best of intentions, one common thing is that people keep their family members at home sometimes arguably too long, right?
Right, yeah.
They end up sacrificing their own quality of life and their objectives and whatever they may need to do. And they do it because they love the person, but sometimes they're not even providing the best care that they could. They're making those sacrifices.
That's what I was about to say.
I just these are some pieces of perspective that you probably have more to say on.
No, I think that is what I would say, for sure. Thank you for that. And I think the way that we are going about Everwood Reserve as a family business, but building something that has the quality and level of care and amenities that you would find in a larger facility, but in that small home atmosphere and managed in the way of a small care home, I think is really going to be the sweet spot in the industry. And I really can't wait to bring it to Tomball.
I think people, this could be its whole separate conversation, but when people are making a decision like this, again, it's one of the most emotional decisions they'll have to make in their life. And it might sound like to an investor or someone who's just considering this, kind of been living and breathing it the same way we have for the last 10 months, this stuff might not sound that significant, but like the paint on the curbs, the long hallways, like some of the finishes and the materials of the floor, the colors that you use on the wall, like all of this stuff. And the reason we chose ground up construction is so that we could control all those variables. We're using Brett Shotkavis and Laura Shotkavis's memory care mansion model. So they've already built these exact buildings. They've worked with different designers and, within the industry who understand those dynamics for memory care. But like all those little things are very important. And the perspective that you have, it's hard to like overstate how what you saw that you did not like about what your family went through is arming you with every bit of motivation that you could possibly need to pour into the families that we'll be serving, at our home. And so I think it's that combination of the purpose built with the actual passion for like, you do care, not only like that they're being taken care of, but that they have the highest quality of life they possibly can. Your background with nonprofit, program director, all that stuff. Maybe you can share some of like how you'll bring that into the home.
Yes. Before I get into that, I wanted to also mention something that we want to offer at Everwood Reserve that we really think it's really important, and I'm going to pay a lot of attention to, is the communication with families and making sure that the process and everything that's going on in the home is completely transparent and that they understand who to get information from. They're never going to be wanting for information because we're going to offer it right away. But that was something when I was dealing with my dad being in a nursing home. And I remember literally trying to find any employee on that floor to talk to. That was impossible, number one. But then once you did finally track them down and try to ask them what was going on, they either didn't have the information, they had inaccurate information, and it was so frustrating and disheartening for me to feel like I was trying to help my dad, but I literally couldn't because he was in a nursing home and I was unable to work collaboratively with the staff there to like really get a handle on what he needed, what was going on, what we needed to do in the future for him. And I never want another family, another individual to feel that way. So that's something that we're going to really take seriously in our community. So I just wanted to get that out there. So then moving into my background in nonprofits as a national program manager, I have experience designing, developing, facilitating, managing, and evaluating programs that are meant to enhance developmental outcomes for human beings.
Which is what you study.
Of all different ages, yes. And that's my academic background as well. So when I was in school, I originally wanted to be a professor and I wanted to do research as my career. And so I started out doing that. I started my psychology career as an undergrad. I was doing research and I also worked in a neuroscience lab. And I was trained to do MRI studies, and we were doing a study on how emotional responses or the feeling of different types of emotions inhibits responses or, impacts your response time, basically. So like if you're really angry or upset, does it take you longer to process something and respond to it? The answer is yes, it does, because you're using a lot of bandwidth in your brain on that like emotional reaction. But so that was the beginning of my career. Then I went into a PhD program and I was a PhD student and doing human development research. And then wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do for my career. I also met you in the middle of that. And so we kind of decided to plan our life together. And so after that time, I didn't go through with the PhD. I left with my master's, and then I started working in nonprofit. And I was trained in program quality evaluation, so programs that are designed to help folks enhance outcomes in different areas of life. How do you actually evaluate if they're doing what you want them to do? So understanding that process of how you can develop programs and put them in place and then actually see outcomes from them, I think that experience also really puts me in a good position to lead our homes and our community.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's something too to be said that you have a research background. And so anyone can run an experiment. But
sure.
Can you...
Well, not everyone can run it. It wouldn't be called an experiment then, but sure.
What I mean is anybody can create some sort of catalyst.
Sure.
And cause a reaction from whatever they're trying to test. Not everyone can understand the results, right? And understanding the results, and especially the results of something static, are different than the results of something on human beings who have their own complexities of how, not only how they develop, behavior-wise, but there's physical, there's mental, there's all these different dimensions. And being able to understand the human mind and how people grow and develop, that translates all the way toward end of life too.
Yes,
and so I think you've worked with different age ranges over the course of your academic and your professional career, combined with the perspective we were talking about earlier, being around the elderly, in your household, it's just interesting to think how you'll be able to apply some of those different things you've done in this context with a renewed and very clear passion for serving seniors, right? It's like you've had the chance to work with those other age ranges, and this is your chance to really now pour into seniors at a time when it's needed more than it ever has been, and it will be for at least decades to come.
Yep, definitely.
Population is not slowing down anytime soon.
No, we all know the silver tsunami is already here. But another note about the academic program that I was in, my master's degree, it's not just a psychology degree, it's actually a multidisciplinary domain in human development. So we looked at biopsychosocial factors. And so when you said all those different aspects, biological, social, psychological, that reminded me. That's exactly what it is. You don't think about human development just from one aspect, right? Like you need to think about it holistically. So not only as somebody ages is their physicality changing, but the mentality is also changing. Your psychology also changes, particularly with memory care and when you're dealing with memory disorders. You could have real personality changes. And how do you deal with that? And how do you serve the grandmas and grandpas in your home and make sure that they remain comfortable, that it remains somewhere that they enjoy being, that you're giving them the best care and as much as you can to make them as comfortable and, make their last years as enjoyable as possible, as comfortable as possible.
Absolutely. We love talking about this side of the business. We understand that different people are looking at this from different lenses, right? Some people that are watching this might be interested in the investment opportunity. Others might be more interested in the behind the scenes of how the business runs. A lot of people that have gravitated towards asking us about this project work in healthcare, and they work in big box places, and they have a huge heart and a desire to help people, but they don't feel like they're effectively able to do it in their environment. So they lean towards businesses like this where they feel like the impact is more measurable and you are able to really see the difference that you're making with the policies and the environments that you create, et cetera. So I think with this series, the goal is to just bring you into our house, into our conversations. And, this is stuff we noodle on all day. We are happy to, I guess, go into those different slices each time, right? We can talk about numbers sometimes. We can talk about individual, we'll have to do one on construction, especially, once we get all closed up here. Because there's a whole story beneath the story there that we'll have to share with the world at some point. But we're happy to.
I'm smiling thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. I think it's a good length, and so I want to wrap it up with what are the next steps for us.
Yeah. So by the
immediate,
by the time this airs, we will be officially launched with our 506c syndicated offering. What that means is that we are able to discuss and market this publicly as an opportunity. As she mentioned, I think at the top, we're raising $2.8 million in investor equity, combined with the bank loan. That's what's going to fund this project. So we've put our own money into it. We've already raised a significant amount of money from the first round we ran, but top priority is going to be raising the remainder of the funds and getting the bank application over the finish line. So we're going to be running a webinar on Monday, June 30th at 6 p.m. Central. We'll make sure wherever we post this that the link to RSVP is in the notes. And I think all eyes are on just acing that, making sure we provide as much information and overview as we can to people so that if they're interested in investing, they have what they need to make a good decision. So all eyes on their capital raise on my side. What about you?
Yes. So let's see. In the coming weeks, I have been focusing on networking with folks here in the senior living industry. So I have a couple meetings next week with folks over coffee. And, we are working to get the word out about the project. And so I've been supporting, the social media plans and, kind of how we're going to market. We're keeping the construction rolling. In the next few weeks, we really have to do a lot of value engineering. We have our 100% MEP plans in hand. So now we can use that information to do some value engineering and get our costs down. for the project. I think, is there anything else I forgot? I think that's enough for now.
100 other things going on, but those are the big rocks we're trying to move up the hill.
Yep. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to Ameen Coffee Chat. We're looking forward to doing more, and we hope you all have a good day.